In the 16 years since Hamas took power in the Gaza Strip, Israel has controlled the movement of nearly all goods and civilians in this small stretch of land. Israel says this blockade is necessary to protect its own citizens from terrorism. And Egypt, which borders Gaza to the south, also supports the blockade. The closure has changed over time, according to the Israeli nonprofit Gisha, which advocates for the freedom of movement of Gazans.
The idea was that you put pressure on the population, but not enough so that it blows up. We likened it sometimes to a pot of water that you have, very, very hot, but trying to keep it from boiling, you're pouring in a little bit of cold water once in a while.
There are two published lists that show what items are restricted from going through the crossings. One list is common to the West Bank and Gaza. There's also an extra list only for Gaza. The lists have included broad categories like communication equipment and navigation equipment. These broad categories make it difficult for Gazans to know what exactly is allowed through these crossings. And these lists have changed over time. At one point, items that have been barred from entering Gaza included toys, paper, chocolate, tea, and wood. In 2009, an Israeli human rights group submitted a petition requesting Israel to disclose their policy of what food and other goods could be transferred to the Strip. The case revealed there were documents in the Israeli army's possession showing efforts to calculate the number of calories each Gazan needed to survive. This information informed Israel's border crossing restrictions on food items.
It was a real attempt on purpose to kind of push people down to a minimum standard, rather than in other situations of need in the world where you're trying to, push the standard up. Luckily, the policy did change and food was allowed in. But still, the damage that had been done and that continued to be done to the economy over the years meant that even if the food is allowed in, you have so many people who can't afford to buy it.
Israel in 2010 introduced sweeping travel restrictions that limited movement between Gaza, the West Bank, and Israel. In order to leave the Strip, Gazans had to fall into one of three categories: medical patients, workers, or humanitarian cases.
It wasn't enough, let's say, just that you hadn't seen your mother in 10 years and you missed her. It wouldn't have been enough if, let's say, your daughter was giving birth and you wanted to be by her side. And you'd have to prove to Israel that your parent was actually on the verge of death or gravely ill in order to get a permit. We found ourselves in many cases working on behalf of our clients, having to provide further documentation and getting into real arguments with the Israeli military just about how ill this person's parent was.
Even if you are part of one of these groups, travel could be denied. Application processing can take weeks, even for medical emergencies. Applications could be denied without giving an explanation, and tens of thousands of applications each year receive no response at all. Following a Hamas attack on October 7th, Israel soon closed all crossings that remained open into Gaza. This included the transport of food, fuel, water, and medical supplies. Aid trucks have now started slowly re-entering the Strip through the Rafah crossing, and a limited number of people, including some foreign nationals, were able to cross into Egypt. But officials are left wondering how these crossings will remain open and what will be allowed to enter.
Most of the population are children and young people. About 70% of the population are under the age of 30. Most of those people never left Gaza, actually. They never saw Jerusalem. They never saw Ramallah. They never saw Haifa. A lot of young people without hope for their future and a real sense of hopelessness.